Well, there's 8 billion people in the world, and only about a billion of them are born into a country that has a reserve currency, meaning a strong currency that other banks want to save in. So the other 7 billion people either live under some sort of authoritarian construct or they live under a really shitty currency. The people who are at the golden billion have financial privilege. They live in societies where there's depositor insurance, and the government, generally speaking, is going after fraudsters and protecting regular, innocent people. And you're talking about a very small percentage. I mean, really, you're talking about Americans, which is 4% of the world. But, generally speaking, you might also be talking about Europeans, Japanese, Canadians, folks from New Zealand, Australia, to varying degrees. So you're talking roughly about a billion people, maybe a little less, that really have that power and that privilege.
All right. So today we have Alex Gladstein on the show. Alex, thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show today.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So I'd love to start, as the name of the show is called Bitcoin Journeys, I'd love to start this episode by talking about the beginning of your Bitcoin journey. So how did you get started with Bitcoin, and what did that initial part of your Bitcoin journey look like?
Sure. Well, I came from the human rights field. I started working for a nonprofit called the Human Rights Foundation. Before Bitcoin was created, we set out to help people living under dictatorships around the world. There are a lot of different kinds of human rights violations globally, but basically, if you live under dictatorship, there's very few people who are there to help you. In the West, we have all kinds of different NGOs and advocacy groups, ways to sort of sue governments and hold them accountable. But for people living in China or Saudi Arabia or Russia or Venezuela, things are very tough. So we exist to help people who live in difficult political climates. And over the last 15 years, we've seen governments exert financial repression and target their opponents using money as a political weapon. This started as a fringe thing, and now it's become basically a default attack vector whenever an authoritarian government wants to go after their opponents, whether they be a political party or an environmental group or a journalist organization. It's a bank account frozen. It's a, confiscated funds. It's a, debanked, financially isolated. On top of that, people living in dictatorships often use currency that's not convertible globally. It's hard for them to interact with world markets. It's hard for them to send and receive money from family for a variety of reasons. Those might be ranging from just local economic collapse, could be sanctions, some sort of foreign control on their society. It could be capital controls. It could be internal domestic controls. But the point is that what we've seen is that people living under dictatorships have a very hard time with money, and that became more clear over my career. I mean, look, we saw the WikiLeaks stuff very early. We saw stuff happening in Ukraine and elsewhere a couple of years after that. And by 2016, 2017, it became clear that we needed to add Bitcoin to the work we're doing at the Human Rights Foundation, and the rest is history.
Yeah. And I think it's a very interesting perspective to come to Bitcoin with. And I think, especially coming at it from a human rights perspective, I think is very fascinating. When you initially were working with these, well, in these different countries, is it through the people that you discovered Bitcoin, or was it through more the overall, or let's say, was it more brought to you? Like how did that discovery exactly look like for you?
Well, we just saw it pop up. I mean, we saw WikiLeaks get debanked, and Julian posted a Bitcoin address alphanumeric on the Twitter handle of WikiLeaks. So that was interesting. There were activists in Ukraine who were similarly debanked, and we were able to reach them with Bitcoin, and on and on and on. I mean, and it became more obvious over time, and now it's just kind of a default way to get money into places where the government does not approve. It's money that dictators can't stop.
Mm-hmm. I've heard on other podcasts that you've done that you say that you're a very skeptical person in nature, and Bitcoin, I think initially people do meet it with a lot of skepticism because it has a lot of big promises that are hard to deliver on and fulfill on. So, after you're starting to see Bitcoin being used in whether it's through WikiLeaks or in the Ukraine, um, had you had much knowledge about Bitcoin before that? Did you know anything about it? And then what did that initial dive yourself look into when you really wanted to start to learn? Okay, I noticed that people are using this as a rights tool, but now, I want to learn more about it. What did that process look like?
Well, it was certainly harder then than it is now. Today, there's a plethora of good Bitcoin education and explainers. Back then, it was trickier. There was a lot of noise. Thankfully, there were a couple good accounts that I was able to follow. Andreas Antonopoulos, Matt Odell, a few other people who seemed to bridge the Bitcoin world with the political world, meaning they seemed to really understand how this thing was going to impact human rights. And I followed them. I read everything that Andreas wrote. I started listening to what Matt was doing, following him. A few other people, Jameson Lopp, a few others who really embodied more of the cypherpunk angle, as opposed to the number go up Austrian economics stuff. This was different. This was a little bit different framing. It was easier for me to understand, so that really helped. And at the time, it was a crazy moment where all of this tokenization was exploding. I mean, this was obviously a very exciting year for Bitcoin, where you had the block size wars and you had the Bitcoin cash fork and you had Bitcoin's price rise over time, the China ban. But basically, you had Bitcoin go from $2,000 to $19,000 from June to December. It was a crazy, crazy time. And at the same time, you had, um, yeah, this total explosion of ICOs, where like it was even Coinbase only at the time listed like three cryptocurrencies. Like it wasn't what we have today. It was very different. And there was so many people pushing these other tokens. So that was hard for me because, if you're not knowledgeable about it, you're like, oh yeah, Litecoin. It's just like silver to Bitcoin's gold, or oh cool, Zcash, a privacy coin, and then you have Filecoin, and it's going to help with censorship resistant storage, and there were all these narratives, and of course now we see them all. They were all basically some sort of scam, most of them. But like at the time, it was hard to understand that. So it took me, I would say, another year after the initial deep dive um, to really start to figure out that Bitcoin was the thing. So that was maybe by early 2018, I had finally sort of figured that one out. But the first year was very confusing. I mean, it was like being thrown into like a circus, basically. Um, but thankful for those cypherpunk accounts that helped me kind of see the light and figure it out.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think initially when most people, I know myself, for example, as well, when you do get into, well, I think there's a few avenues in which you can get into Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. I think there's one, of course, that's something that you're a lot more familiar with, which is truly out of necessity. People who need this tool because everything else doesn't work for them, or yeah, it's just a way to escape, right? And I think that perspective to me is very interesting because, especially, I live in Europe,
Yep.
but I also lived in the US for a while. People don't really understand that as much, and you wrote also a really interesting book about financial privilege, but that's also a concept that probably not many people are very aware of. So I love to hear through your experience and your background, what is financial privilege and how do you explain that, also in the context of Bitcoin?
Well, there's 8 billion people in the world, and only about a billion of them are born into a country that has a reserve currency, meaning a strong currency that other banks want to save in, and sort of property rights with free speech and liberal democracy, where there's protections for the individual against the state. So the other 7 billion people either live under some sort of authoritarian construct or they live under a really shitty currency. So the people who are at the golden billion have financial privilege. They live in societies where there's depositor insurance, and the government, generally speaking, is going after fraudsters and protecting regular innocent people, generally speaking. Where the currency you use is accepted around the world and is, you know, respected by people in other countries and accepted. And you're talking about a very small percentage. I mean, really, you're talking about Americans, which is 4% of the world. But, generally speaking, you might also be talking about Europeans, Japanese, Canadians, folks from New Zealand, Australia, to varying degrees. I mean, it's not like if you show up with New Zealand currency in Egypt, they're going to, it's pretty worthless. But, dollars and euros can get you most places. So you're talking roughly about 1 billion people, maybe a little less, that really have that power, and that privilege. And for everybody else, money is a problem. It's hard. It's like an issue. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it is a pretty complex topic to really distill into a succinct few sentences or something like that. But I think it's a fascinating perspective. And for me, I'm also curious when through your experience in these different countries, for those people, what is the main value proposition that they see in Bitcoin?
Well, a global monetary language. I mean, when you talk to people in these different countries, the idea that they can use the same network as everybody else is very compelling. And that's one of the reasons people like dollars, right? B, obviously, the performance over time. And, it takes a little bit of reflection and patience to understand this properly, because people really like to think like short term. They're like, oh my God, Bitcoin's 60K, but before it was 70. What's the deal? They're totally missing the fact that it was 5K or 1K or $500 or $1. Like, they're not seeing the big picture. People who have broken economies see the big picture a little bit easier. It's a little easier to see that stuff. So, yeah, I think the global nature of it, the open nature of it, the fact that it's really good savings technology. I mean, these are all reasons that it can't be stopped, that it can be used without ID. There's so many different reasons why people might be drawn to it.
Yeah. And I think a challenge that I, foresee is, and I think also what a lot of people don't quite understand, also within these countries, because I think Bitcoin, it's a digital currency. It's operated, there's no physical manifestation of Bitcoin itself. And in a lot of these countries, the more impoverished nations who don't maybe have access to traditional, a laptop or even a smartphone or anything like that. How, in your experience, have they kind of been onboarded to Bitcoin, or what are some of the challenges or interesting lessons that you've learned in your
Well,
experiences there?
most people start with some sort of KYC product. I mean, it's just the reality. I mean, most people start with a Binance or a Coinbase or whatever. They don't really know what's going on. They're dabbling with it. To this day, non-KYC ways to buy Bitcoin are trickier. Now, they're very popular in certain countries. You can do it through P2P trading, or you can earn it, which is my favorite way to get Bitcoin. Of course, you can mine it. That's a little more limiting. But yeah, I mean, most people start with some sort of exchange type product, and then they go on their journey from there, right? It takes time. Like, it's not everybody's going to be immediately like earning Bitcoin and using Sparrow to put it into a cold card and separating out the seed. I mean, this is not like, that is a couple years after you start your journey, right? Like, so understanding how to use Bitcoin properly takes a lot of time. Um, it, we're not there yet where there's like a school where everybody learns. I mean, maybe that's the case in 10 years. Maybe every public school will have a Bitcoin thing where, or it's just socially there, like driving school, and most kids learn how to drive. Um, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, governments and authorities have really never been that interested in educating people about money, right? You don't really have, you know, how to use a credit card or whatever. This is just not, like, no one learns about being financially sound or responsible. So maybe not. But I do think that it normalizes and people learn how to use them. I also think that UX improves. The UX for Bitcoin has improved so dramatically over the last 5 years, especially 10 years. I mean, it's crazy. And I think Noster will play a big role here over the next 3-4 years. A lot of people are going to come to Noster and start using Noster for creative content and communications. And Noster is Bitcoin native. So I think that these two technologies are really going to synergize with each other.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I think, well, especially this week, it's pretty noticeable, pretty important because we just had the founder of Telegram who was arrested in France, and I
Yeah,
think this brought a lot of attention to Noster and Bitcoin
no
and freedom
kidding.
technology.
An
And
explosion of interest.
yeah, exactly. But I think Bitcoin's one concept, Noster's another. But I know that you're very active on it, and so I'd love to hear your perspective a bit, and if you could explain it also briefly. Just what is
Yep.
Noster? What's the value proposition, and how does that also combine with Bitcoin?
So I wrote an article for Reason that people can look at. Um, Came out a couple weeks ago, and it's a helpful like 101. So folks can look up my name and Noster and Reason, and they'll find it on the internet, or on Noster. But basically, Noster's a decentralized communications platform, which is really it's really more like a protocol, like Bitcoin or email, where you have different apps for Bitcoin, right? All these different apps sit on top of Bitcoin. They can use Bitcoin. All these different apps sit on top of the email protocol, right? They can all use the email protocol to talk to each other. All the different Bitcoin apps can use the Bitcoin protocol to talk to each other. All these different Nostr apps can use the Nostr protocol to talk to each other. So you might have a client that you download that's kind of like social media, and it uses your Nostr identity, which is basically a public-private key pair. You have an NPub and an NSEC. Your NPub is how other people find you, and your NSEC is your password for creating content. So whenever you want to actually like make a post or send a message, you have to put in your NSEC. But the point is, like your NPub and your NSEC are your identity. Like you can go wherever you want, so you're not trapped in what's called a golden prison. So the problem with YouTube or Meta or X or Telegram or whatever is you can't like move your identity somewhere else. Like you're in there and you're stuck, and if you get kicked off, you lose everything. Um, you're stuck inside. These are platforms that are prisons. So the idea behind Nostr is like it's a new way of thinking about it, where you can have a whole bunch of different platforms, and you can just choose one, use it. If you don't like it, you can move to another one. It's a very different way of thinking about it, communicating on the internet. And the native currency of the internet is attention. Currently, the modern internet, the way that it's been bastardized from its sort of open source beginnings. But yeah, I mean, basically, like that's why you see so much drama and negativity and aggressiveness and car crashes on the internet, on social media, is because it's geared towards making you addicted to using the product and getting you to stay on it. Nostr feels very different because the currency is not attention. You aren't the product. You're the product on normal social media. On Nostr, you're not the product. You are in control, and the currency is Bitcoin. You don't have to use Bitcoin. That's the other cool part. There are all these other like decentralized social media things, but they're all reliant on crypto tokens. You don't have to use Bitcoin if you don't want to on Nostr. It's not. It's a totally separate protocol. However, they really mesh well. And what's cool is it allows you to tip and to donate or to pay for things very seamlessly in the Nostr environment. So you could be a content creator doing long form publishing. You could be, you could create an open source AI system that people pay to use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. God knows what. There's all kinds of cool stuff people are doing. Most of the types of apps you see today will be on Nostr, whether that be um, renting property like Airbnb, or booking transportation like Uber, or finding a place to eat, or communities, or again, long form publishing like Ghost or Substack. I mean, we're very early, and you're starting to see some of these things. Nostr is not quite built out enough yet for a lot of this. Like, we don't have really slick group chats, Telegram style yet, but they're coming, and they're going to be better than what Telegram had. Um, so you're starting with like almost like a chronological feed, Twitter style, Instagram style feel for these first clients of Noster. Um, but there's messaging and there's long form and there's other things happening. And over time, you're going to see this start to get built out. And it's very exciting because you can't stop it. I mean, it's you own your NPub and NSEC. So if one of the big Nostr clients that's popular, let's say the leader gets arrested, that sucks. I'm really sorry. I'm gonna use this other one. It's sort of like leaderless. It's like a hydra. So it's very exciting, and I'm glad we have it.
Yeah, agreed. It's a super exciting space, and I think even from, well, when I first discovered Nostr, I think it was about a year and a half ago with Damus primarily was the app at the moment, and now you have a bunch of different other apps that support the Nostr protocol. And for me, I'll be fully honest with you, I think it's a great idea, and I think it's going to be used. But I see right now, in my own personal experience, for example, because largely the network effects are still on platforms like X or other social media platforms where you have that community is still there, whether it be Telegram, X, whatever. And so, how do you personally see Noster scaling? Do you think it'll be more through necessity because more centralized companies will get encroached on, whether that be through government or whatever? Or do you see really where the convenience factor will be so high on Nostr and the usability and everything will be so good that people will naturally move there, or maybe just a combination of both as well?
I mean, look, it's Nostr's cool in that you don't have to have global state. It's not like Bitcoin where you need global state. There are Nostr communities inside Japan and China that are completely isolated from the rest of Nostr. You can have Nostr communities that don't talk to anybody else. You have basically relays that talk to each other, but they can be cut off. They can be like islands. So Nostr doesn't need global state, and that's very powerful. Um, it's trivial to link these, right? If you are a content creator and you want to push today, a lot of these relays are free to use. In the future, you'll pay a small amount probably for good ones, but you know you'll be able to distribute your content and pay. Maybe there's a national security community or art community or whatever, and you can kind of pick and choose where you want to be. And then in terms of you could just follow whoever you want. That's in your control. So basically, it's much more customizable. But the point is, I think it's important because it meshes with Bitcoin so much. I mean, it's remarkable to see this. I should also mention eCash. What we've also seen is a flowering of eCash, which was a technology created in the 1980s. We've had it for a long time, but it didn't really work so well with the dollar as its like substrate. It needed Bitcoin, and only in the last few years did people figure out how to put eCash on Bitcoin. And now you have both Fediment and Cashew as not competing, but complementary protocols. One is more federated, one is centralized, and they are ways to deposit Bitcoin into a Bitcoin bank and issue eCash, which is totally private. You could do whatever you want with eCash. The mint directors could issue just default private Bitcoin denominated eCash. They could do dollar denominated eCash. They could basically do anything any blockchain can do. Okay. So we'll see where this goes. But I mean, they could do lending, they could do God knows what. Um, the point is that these eCash protocols are growing and they give a lot of power to Bitcoin end users for small amounts, right? You never want to put that much in there. But I mean, you can have really good privacy. You can have really cheap transactions. You can have um, very fast transactions. And with eCash, what's cool about it is it's just because of the gateway architecture behind it, or essentially the Lightning service provider architecture. It all runs on Lightning under the hood. Like the eCash user doesn't interact with Lightning necessarily, but when they're paying a Bitcoin invoice, there's Lightning happening in the background. So Lightning is really coming into its own as almost like a B2B thing, and then individuals might use eCash. This is really compelling, and who knows? Maybe Bitcoin changes and becomes more flexible, and we get some sort of covenant type system where you can do more of this stuff on, totally trustlessly. But even if that doesn't happen, I still think this sort of Bitcoin Lightning eCash stack, especially integrated with Nostr, is really exciting. I mean, it's just something we didn't even have 18 months ago. People weren't even really thinking about this at all. 2 years ago, no, not even. So who knows what's going to be next, man? I mean, people are coming up with freedom technology left and right. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I agreed. I think it is all very exciting, and also how quickly the development's happening. Even in the time that I've been in the space, it's been amazing to see. And I think what's interesting to me is you have these two great forces, um, I guess, clashing at the moment, right? You have all this great freedom technology within Bitcoin, whether it be Noster, um, but then you have the state who typically doesn't like to lose control. And I'm sure through your experience in more oppressive regimes, you've experienced this already more firsthand. But I think now we're starting to see this more in the Western world. So how do you see in the next years? How do you personally see that playing out with the clash of these two forces? Let's say.
Well, I think to add to what you said, I think you kind of have three. There's three things happening here globally. One is Bitcoin adoption. One is kind of the old, and one is sort of the old fiat system and how it's trying to survive. Um, Ultimately, the long term narrative of what is happening is that the new system is growing and the old one is dying and it's going to collapse. And maybe that won't be very pretty, but this is globally what's going to happen. I mean, a lot of energy is going to be sucked out of fiat and pulled into Bitcoin, and its value is going to grow a lot. That's a very high level. What is the fiat system going to do to try and survive? So it's been through many iterations over the last 100 years as it has moved from sort of being based on gold to sort of being based on oil, to trying enforcing people to use it through legal tender laws around the world, through IMF and World Bank regulations, and through market forces. And just in general, people wanted to use an easy currency. They chose the dollar. It gave America great powers, basically. Um, Stable coins are interesting. I mean, stable coins are kind of a way that the current system is learning how to survive in a new territory. Um, Increased usage of stablecoins is a lifeline for the dollar. I mean, it's more dollar users in more places. It's kind of like the euro dollar system, which also created massive demand for the dollar, and really helped sustain and expand the dollar's role in the world. So stablecoins are like one way that the system is evolved. The current system is evolving. The other one would be central bank digital currencies, where the state is trying to exert more control over retail spending. They don't necessarily want it in the hands of private companies. Certainly not Bitcoin. They would prefer that citizens, spend in a way that's trackable and controllable, where there could be, more micro control by these central bankers and authorities over your spending and saving habits. I don't think that's going to be very popular. It hasn't been proven to be very popular so far. We have a whole project tracking this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you'll see violence being used to enforce CBDC type programs. You'll see the markets globally really demand stable coins and dollar assets, um, for a while. I mean, this is kind of where we are, and all the time being, you're going to see Bitcoin continue to grow and grow and grow and grow. I mean, eventually, no one's going to want it. I mean, eventually, the stable coins aren't going to be dollar stable coins. They'll be Bitcoin derivatives, and you'll want to be self custodying UTXOs. I don't know if everybody can. I think it's possible, but obviously not possible today. But I think it's possible in the future. But for now, I think you want to just spread the word, teach people about Bitcoin, get people to understand how to self custody it, and we go from there.
Yeah. I think it'll be very interesting to see how the space develops. I think, there will be lots more developments. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. But also, as you alluded to, I think naturally within these cycles, I think now we're at a period where we would expect probably a lot of people to more and more be onboarded into Bitcoin. A lot of times that looks different. It looks different for different people. But a lot of times, people also come through Bitcoin through the general, cryptocurrency space, if you will. So we covered a lot of, I think, kind of complex topics that are very fascinating. But what advice would you have for newcomers to the space who are just entering, don't know much about Bitcoin or crypto or Noster? What advice would you have to new Bitcoiners coming into the space?
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin isn't yours unless you control it. So learn how to self custody your Bitcoin. Try to use Bitcoin without KYC. Try to earn Bitcoin, and in general, try to invest time in it before you invest your money in it. Like learn about it. Like spend a lot of time reading about it. It's worth it. I mean, you spend a lot of time learning how to drive a car, or you spend a lot of time taking a course in college on history or something like that. You should spend a lot of time on Bitcoin. I mean, it should be essentially, several hours a week for a year. That's what you should try to think about. So you can read books, you can watch YouTube videos, you can listen to podcasts. You know, I think the goal should be for you to be comfortable with sending and receiving it and storing it, and then everything else is just sort of gravy. So follow people like BTC Sessions, and he's always showing people how to use the new tools. I think people like him are great. So anyway, yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Thanks so much for your time, Alex, and I really enjoyed this conversation.
Cool. See you later.